Hello, this is Becky McClure, and today I'm going to be speaking to you about Skinner. No, I'm not going to be talking about Mr. Skinner, the principal from The Simpsons. I'm going to be speaking to you about B.F. Skinner, who is known as the father of operant conditioning, and he made many contributions to the behaviorist theory of learning. So, a quick overview of what I'm going to be speaking about is B.F. Skinner's history, his childhood, some interesting facts about him, how he came to his theory, and also some practices of behaviorism in the classroom. So everyone wants to know what BF stands for, and here it is. Burris Frederick, quite a name. B.F. Skinner was born March 20th, 1904 in Susquehanna, Pennsylvania, where he spent most of his childhood. He then died August 18th, 1990. So here he is as a small boy, complete with his cute little sailor outfit. And here he is again with his little brother, Edward. So B.F. and Edward were known as creator inventors. They loved to make things. Some of the things that they made in their childhood was they went and built a shack in the woods. They also built a cart with an opposite directional steering wheel. And they also created a system for getting oxygen out of seawater, but that failed. So the sad thing is that Edward died at the age of 16 to a cerebral hemorrhage. This is believed to be the cause why Skinner became an atheist. He was raised in a Christian home. His grandmother was a Christian, but due to some of the teachings about hell and also because of his brother's death, it is believed that that's the reason he became an atheist. So those are a few interesting things about him in his childhood. Some other interesting things about Skinner was that he loved to write and he loved behaviorism. So as you can see here, he has several books: The Behavior of Organisms, The Technology of Teaching, Science and Human Behavior. All of these books are related to behaviorism. He really loved it. He studied it. He believed in it. So he obviously wrote a lot about it. This story here, Walden 2, this is actually a story about a fictional community in 1940s America. The community uses operant conditioning to raise their children. Walden 2 depicts a lifestyle that does not support war. It encourages minimal consumption, rich social relationships, personal happiness, and leisure. It was controversial because of the teachings about conditioning, but it obviously is something that he really personally dealt with and enjoyed writing about. The other interesting thing here, and we may have learned about this in another course of ours, is the air crib. This is actually Debbie Skinner, his daughter, and the inscription reads here, Debbie Skinner, 11 months, has lived in a soundproof, dirt-proof box since birth. And the quote is, we keep the temperature 78, humidity 50. She is never too hot or too cold, but just right. So it's pretty interesting because of his research with animals, pigeons and rats specifically. He used the same concept with his daughter. This was actually built to help his wife cope with the day-to-day tasks of child rearing. I read somewhere that he mentioned that his wife was unsure of having more children because of how difficult it is to raise them, keep them clean and fed and happy, and this was his response to that. So he built this box. The baby lived in it. They left her naked sometimes. You can actually see here that there's a roller sheet, and this is kind of like a puppy pad. It goes up underneath that, so if she spit up or used the restroom, they would just have to remove that instead of changing all of her clothes and all those things you have to do to keep a baby happy and dry. So pretty interesting for him that he used the same thing, and it actually reduced laundry, diaper rash, cradle cap, and allowed the baby to be more mobile, comfortable, and less prone to crying. And it actually worked. I wonder why it didn't take off as much as it did for him. So those are some more interesting facts about him, and we'll move on to his theory. As I've already mentioned, B.F. Skinner was a behaviorist. But what is behaviorism? Behavior theory identifies all learning in terms of behavior that can be observed, measured, and recorded. So there's a few people that are key in behaviorism, and I just want to briefly talk about them. John Watson, who's right here, this handsome man, he wasn't considered a founding father, but his article, Psychology as the Behaviorist Views It, which he wrote in 1913, is actually the article that really pushed behaviorism into the spotlight, made it more prominent. But there's other people that really pushed it before this. So John Watson was an American psychologist. He was influenced by Ivan Pavlov. He believed learning only depends on observable behaviors. So the things that you can see, that's where your learning is based out of. Edward Thorndike, this guy right here, his term, the law of effect, that's really a big thing for Skinner. He believed a law in the law of effect, and it's what Skinner based operant conditioning out of. And Ivan Pavlov right here, we know him because of his famous study of Pavlov's dogs, and he is the founder of classical conditioning, which I'll speak about briefly as well. So there's also one more, John Locke, who is considered a founding father of behaviorism. His ideas really paved the way for future behaviorists. So this next part, I'm going to need a little help. And I'm going to ask my friend here, we'll just call her Vicky. We'll ask Vicky to help demonstrate where behaviorism falls on our scale of learning theories. So if we know from class, there are 5 major learning theories. And those are maturation, behavioral, social learning, constructivist, and multiple intelligences. But there's major 3 that we talked about in class. I'm briefly going to describe those, and Vicky's going to do her little walk across our scale. So if we start over here, we know this to be maturationist. And if Vicky walks over to the middle of the road here, we know this to be constructivism. And then if she moves over here, this is behaviorism. So Skinner's theory is based over here in behaviorism. We know behaviorism to be the theory that identifies all learning in terms of behavior that can be observed, measured, and recorded. And then we know that constructivism is based off of the child making meaning on their own and with interactions with others. And then we know maturation, that they believe that child's development and learning will unfold naturally as long as the proper conditions are set in place for them. So we know from class and from Vicky's little walk over here that behaviorism is closely related to direct instruction. And direct instruction is teacher-initiated, it's not child-led, it's teaching by the book, and which is not always looked nicely upon in early childhood education. So what we're learning more of the constructivist, maturationist, somewhere in this realm, and behaviorism isn't technically the developmentally appropriate practice for early childhood education. So I'm just going to briefly talk about classical conditioning, which is a big part of behaviorism. Classical conditioning is not Skinner's theory, but is the basis for operant conditioning, which is his theory. So classical conditioning is learning occurs through association. So there's a neutral stimulus, which causes an association to happen and causes a behavior. So to explain that, I'm going to ask Vicky to come back. Hello, Vicky. And she's going to have this cute little bell. And she rings it. And we're going to call this little guy Alan. Alan and Vicky are seeing each other. They're very serious, okay? So Vicky rings her bell when Alan is near her, and she just asks, "Hey, Alan, can you bring me a latte?" And so Alan complies because he loves her and he has those feel-good feelings about her. He goes off and he brings her a latte. So this occurs multiple times. So she rings the bell, asks him for a latte, he goes off. He brings it back. So this occurs so many times that anytime the bell rings, he has an association with grabbing a latte, bringing it to her, and having feelings about love. He loves her. She's asking him to do things for her. This is classical conditioning. The bell rings, he automatically goes off, gets the latte because he's been conditioned to do so. So that is the basis for operant conditioning, which I'll talk about next. Now I'm going to talk about operant conditioning. Operant conditioning states that learning occurs through reinforcement. Skinner was really big on his experiments about operant conditioning. So his Skinner box, which is shown here, is very similar to the air crib that we saw, although the air crib did not have all these mechanisms like this has. So the little mouse, the experiment went like this. The little mouse would run around the cage, and by accident he would probably hit a lever, and the food would come out here, the food pellet. So once the mouse learned that there was food available to him, they added in the different signals, the speaker, and when the mouse would do something in response to these signals, the food would come out. So the food would learn through reinforcement that if he did a task correctly, he would get a treat. So this is the basis for reinforcement of operant conditioning. So Skinner believed that people and animals learned very similarly. So that's why a lot of his experiments were done with mice and pigeons. So I'm going to ask Vicki and Alan to demonstrate operant conditioning in real life. Here's Vicki again, and she loves lattes and she loves Alan. So Vicki asked Alan to bring her a latte. So he does. He brings it. But Vicki wasn't very nice about it. She didn't say thank you. She didn't give him a hug or a kiss. So Alan wasn't too keen on bringing her another one anytime soon. So one day, she wants another latte, but she knew Alan wasn't really feeling it because he hadn't brought her one in a while without asking. So she asks him one day and decides that when he brings it, she's going to give him a kiss on the cheek, and that's going to help Alan know that he's appreciated, and Alan feels loved. So you know what? Alan's going to bring her lattes more often because he had a positive reinforcement from the experience. So that is operant conditioning in the real world. So ladies, if you want your men to bring you a latte, give him a kiss, give him $1, whatever it is that he wants, so that he feels the appreciation and he'll also want to do it again because he's received positive reinforcement. This now brings us to behavioral theory in the classroom. As I mentioned before, behaviorism isn't well known to be appropriate for the early child care setting, but there are things within behaviorism that we can use to have a good classroom. So here are a few things that I'd like to mention to you. Associate positive, pleasant events with learning. We know that children learn through play, so we should allow that to happen. Because play is positive, play is pleasant. Kids want to do this. So if we allow those things to take place, or maybe we plan events that we know that the kids are interested in, this will promote learning and also a better learning environment for everyone. The next one we can use is to use praise appropriately. We know that we can't praise kids on what they can't control, such as their hair, their clothes, how well they arrive to school on time. Those things are out of their control. But we can praise their effort. We can praise how well they tried to make the letter A. We can praise how well they helped their peers pick up the block center. Those things we can use in the classroom, and it does reinforce positive behaviors, which goes to our next one. We can encourage positive behaviors with positive consequences. So when we encourage positive behaviors, there has to be a positive consequence. So if the kids have cleaned up their area appropriately, if they're doing what they're supposed to, we give them a little extra something just to reinforce that positive behavior. Also, one of the things that is within behaviorism that's really important is to observe, measure, and record. A big thing in behaviorism is that there's objective observation. As teachers, we have to be objective in all that we do. We can't be subjective to our note-taking, our record-taking, because these students have to have a fair chance, and we have to remove ourselves from the situation. All in all, these are the things that we can do in our classroom to promote positive behavior and appropriate learning experiences. One last thing to talk about before I end our presentation is positive and negative reinforcements. Positive and negative reinforcements can be very effective in treatment for human disorders such as autism, anxiety disorders, and antisocial behavior. So positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is when something is added as a result of a behavior after you have engaged in the behavior. Before you engaged in the behavior, what you wanted wasn't present, but after you engaged in the behavior, what you wanted is present. So Johnny asks for a Coke because he doesn't have one. So he asks for one, and he asks very nicely. He says, "Can I have some Coke, please?" And because he asked so nicely, he now has a Coke. So something was added to him because of his behavior. And now we're going to talk about negative reinforcement, which is the opposite. Negative reinforcement occurs when something already present is removed as a result of a behavior. So right here, as it shows, this guy has not showered in a while and he smells. But the behavior is he takes a shower and now the smell is gone. So negative behavior is not technically a bad thing. It just means that something is removed due to a behavior. And these things can be used in the treatment for disorders such as autism and teaching appropriate behavior, anxiety disorders, and antisocial behavior. It is important that we know about positive and negative reinforcements because they occur on a daily basis in our own lives and will occur in the lives of our future students. And this brings me to the close of my presentation. I hope you all enjoyed learning about B.F. Skinner, his history, behaviorism, operant conditioning, positive and negative reinforcements, and also how to use appropriate behaviorist techniques within the child care setting. I've left you all with my references and also this fun quote from B.F. Skinner that says, "A failure is not always a mistake. It may simply be the best one can do under the circumstances. The real mistake is to stop trying." And Dr. Lake, I hope that you focus in on this quote when you're grading this and knowing that I did the best I could do under the circumstances and I did not stop trying. Thank you all for watching and listening.